Hello and welcome back to Triforce Pick the Best of a Thing and argue about it.
Is this a thing now? The pick the best of a thing?
Yeah. Well, we're not historians, anthropologists, educated. We're not
Speak for yourself, mate. Speak for yourself.
And hence, without any qualification or knowledge, we intend now to sort a list of things into which is the best and which are the rest.
And also solve a lot of problems along the way, am I right?
Oh, hell yeah.
That's the dream.
God, we are going to put the world right. And by right, I mean far right, if you know what I mean.
Is that our secret agenda all along on this podcast?
Can we get a Z Kyle? Can we get a couple of Z Kyles?
Oh my.
Well, we are three white guys, so I suppose
True. It's true.
Let's start. So today I wanted to go through what the best... This was a suggestion from someone, by the way, Michael someone, wasn't it?
Yeah, Michael someone. That was actually his last name. Yeah.
But please, if you do have ideas, do send them in. Do mailbag them in. That's another podcast we do. It's arguably a better one, but this is one too.
We want to do this anyway. Fuck
yeah, this is we really want to do this.
So what I've got here is a list of the Civilization 5 technologies.
From Civilization 5, of course. Yeah.
I know some people might question using Civ 5 as our source, but this is merely the inspiration, and I think it is, to be honest with you, a nice, concise list that we understand, but we're not going to discuss it in Civ terms. We're going to discuss it in
and it's also
reality.
broken down by these kind of nebulous eras, right?
Yeah.
And
it's
so
convenient.
We can kind of pick one from each era, and then we can fight them at the end. I think that's a good way to do it. All right. So let's start at the earliest. I think we should start at the beginning of time.
Let's do ancient era.
The wheel.
Now, there is something clearly missing. Oh, the wheel. We'll start with the wheel? Okay.
Yeah.
Zips, go for it.
Well, what is it that you think is missing?
On the wheel?
No. Lewis
Michael
said something is
McIntyre's
missing.
the wheel.
Spin the wheel! So just to be clear, the list is pottery, animal husbandry, mining, sailing, astrology, irrigation, writing, archery, masonry, bronze working, and the wheel.
Yeah, what about the invention of penicillin? What about the invention
Well, that wasn't in the ancient era, was it?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, come on, this is important
But don't
stuff
jump
still.
ahead. That's like a much later era.
We'll definitely write that on the list.
We'll come to that.
We'll get to that.
Pasteurization, really important as well.
That would again be later.
Yes.
So let's just deal with what we have before us.
They invented the wheel, and then the day after, there was like, whoa, pasteurization.
What's this smoke growing on here?
Holy crap! And then the music starts playing because you're having
the link. Click the link in Discord, Sips, so that you're looking at the same list as us, because you're just shouting technologies now, and I'm saying we've got to go via the list. But I think we can immediately disregard archery. Honestly, take archery out, because whilst it is important in Civ, I don't think archery, whilst it was definitely a military advance and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
For a start, it had been around a lot longer than the ancient world. I think a very long time archery had been around for.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure native people would have,
of course,
done some archery
I
for
would
hunting
suspect
and
that
gathering.
it predates the wheel, to be honest with you.
Let's go back to the very beginning, right? Because
how do you know?
We would be remiss if we didn't mention something much earlier, okay? At the very beginning...
The internet.
Fire,
yeah, of course.
You want to say fire?
Well, no, but I was going to say fire.
The discovery of fire, or being able to wield fire, right?
Fire, yeah. The ability to on demand make a fire is.
Now, there's some
arguably without that,
had.
nothing goes on.
That it was the OG, and therefore everything follows, right? But there's also some argument to had that humanity didn't really even invent fire. Fire was kind of invented by or discovered by our earlier ancestors, our earlier Homo erectus and these Neanderthals. There's some evidence to show that we wouldn't have actually even evolved as a species and have these big brains if fire wasn't used by our
right. It's just impossible.
It was just mostly to cook food, right? They cooked food.
Well, that's one of the reasons apparently, like, even our brains are this big, is that because we we can consume.
Because when you heat things, they expand. I get where you
get a lot more nutrition out of something that's being cooked.
So you get more juice.
Advanced. So yeah, we won't. So maybe we won't do fire. I just wanted to give it a little nod as a.
Well, I feel like fire is something that, like, yeah, sure, they figured out how to create the spark to light a fire or whatever, but they would have seen fire before that as well, right? Naturally in the world, like if they were,
because that's
a dry summer or whatever, like
lightning storms would have
lightning storms
fire.
Or whatever, yeah.
I mean, for vegans, for example, animal husbandry.
Yeah.
Great advance for humanity. Terrible time for animals. So, pottery. Everybody hates pots, don't they?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of pottery enjoyers out there, for sure.
Yeah,
like, there's a big time.
Of course.
I actually love pots. I've got a couple of pots that I've bought off, like, Instagram pot makers.
Right.
You can definitely buy pot on the internet as well.
Yeah. Even today, there's people,
nowadays,
individuals
it's a lot easier,
making pots.
So just to go back to fire, let's ignore fire because it's too
fire.
obviously
like
without
caves.
that we don't exist.
We'll ignore rock hitting people with
hitting hitman or thing with rock. We'll take all that out.
We'll get rid of any like primitive tribalism.
So let's clarify something here. That technology, whilst you could say that making fire was technology, is so fundamental that we're going to move on to things like the wheel.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason the wheel didn't come around until we'd advanced to a certain point, probably once we'd settled down and started farming, is what the fuck do you need a wheel for if you're living as a hunter-gatherer?
Right.
Is my point. Like, yes, you could build a little cart, I suppose, but in order to do that, you'd probably need to have a place where you could settle down and make a wheel and build a wagon and all the rest of it. And I can't imagine that they had little wagons that they pulled along behind them. I think they just carried what they needed. They didn't need to bring much with them. And they just gathered every day. Didn't take long. There's bountiful food and animals around. There weren't many people. It's not like it's all getting harvested up and nothing was owned. And I think when the food runs out, you just walk down the trail a little bit and get some more down there. So I don't think that any of this technology existed really.
I wonder what the first wheel looked like.
Stage.
Like when you watch cartoons, they always have this massive wheel.
Like Fred Flintstone's tires.
It's huge. It's like the size of a person. But I guess the first wheel probably was just like a little, like one of those little back tires on a tricycle, like really small.
Well, what do we think it would have been made out of? Because stone, I think.
It would have been stone for sure, right? It would have been just... Yeah,
because
probably...
that's quite hard to work stone.
Well, if they had a lot of time back then, and if they would have had some chisels or some primitive tools, they could have done it. Somebody's just being really bored sitting around.
A tree is round, and if you cut it and you
just
cut a section out,
what are you cutting it with?
Round.
You're not using a laser.
And things. No,
they didn't have a saw back then. What are you talking about?
Sure, they had primitive axes and sharpened stones. They could
see
work
what
their
you
way
mean.
through it.
Yeah, but
the natural shape of it is round.
It would have been lumpy as shit, though. It wouldn't have been perfectly cut.
Well, and the rock is going to be good. You take a rock and you're going to take a whole rock.
You got a better time. You have a better chance at potentially smoothing out a rock over a long period of time than you do cutting down a big tree.
No. I think Pyrian is absolutely right. I think the ancient people were cutting down trees. I think the bark was just coming off, and because when you take the bark off some of those trees, it's nice and smooth inside. I reckon they were quite circular. They were rolling around. I don't think the wheel was even discovered. I think it was just like people were like already using logs to roll stuff around.
Of course, like Stonehenge. That's how they think they moved Stonehenge.
That's how they got Stonehenge over there, wasn't it? Apparently, with a load of
because on the Flintstones, the wheels are made of stone, and then they have wooden beams. They got wooden beams in the middle.
I don't know if we should really use that as a primary.
Well, that's an interesting point, Professor.
It's the only visual I got.
I believe Fred Flintstone.
They didn't have TikTok back then or Reddit, so what else am I supposed to base anything on? Yeah,
we don't have a clear evidence of the wheel.
I think if you have a log that you're using to roll things, the natural evolution of a log, instead of having a whole log,
how are you rolling things on a log though? Like
because you put a log down, and then you put another log and another log, and then as you pull things, the logs spin,
right,
and then you take one from the back and move it to the front.
So you're making more of like a conveyor belt with the
exactly
logs.
Right. Yeah,
right.
Which comes later.
Somebody obviously said, conveyor belt. Let's put that in modern era.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got all your logs laid out, and it would be a natural evolution of thinking to say, well, I don't want to have to move this log. What if we used one of these logs which spin when like torque is applied to them, and put two bigger circles on either end, and just rested something on the wood. And
Jesus,
the wheel
imagine
can turn.
that conversation.
Yeah. And someone would be like, that's a fucking great idea. What, Mog? What do you want, Mog? I'm busy with log, Mog.
It's so clear now, Ugg. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you were trying to get my attention. You're like, Ugg,
no,
Ugg.
No, that was the invention of the wheel conversation right there.
Oh, I see. Wow. Sorry.
So loosely translated, it's because it's quite a complex thing you guys are describing. I'm just wondering how like these guys really sat down and had a good old conversation about how to go forward with it all. You know what I mean? Like,
well, we don't know when language first came about. It was certainly when they were doing the wheel and stuff like that. They could talk. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've been able to speak for some time. It would be fundamental, wouldn't it, to be able to convey meaning?
Yeah.
And even with a lot of it was with hand gestures and symbolism and stuff.
Sure.
I'm sure they had a language.
There must have been some really frustrating times, though, right? Like trying to explain.
Especially if you bumped into some.
It needs to fucking roll. It has
to roll. It's about talk, for God's sake. Yeah.
I think with these early ancient technologies, the first one really is agriculture, right? That was the point at which nomadic, at least in my understanding, humanity sort of started to settle down, and you could see how that would be kind of an evolutionary process, right? Like
agriculture and husbandry probably around the same time.
They would start coming back to the same places. I guess
if we combine animal husbandry and irrigation, then to cover and pottery. To cover farming, the advance towards an agrarian and sort of more agricultural and farming-based permanent structures follow. I mean,
this is obviously a key element of humanity, the beginning of modern humanity, right? Because previous to that, there was a very long time, hundreds of thousands of years, when humanity was kind of not making any progress, relatively speaking, by being nomadic, by wandering around, by not being permanent, by living kind of on a whim. And it wasn't until permanent settlements were established that humanity got a lot worse, in a sense. Like, we got a lot more disease, we got a lot more problems, health problems and other issues.
We started to think about territory and we started to think about borders and war and who's in charge and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because if you just did still happen when you were a nomad. Nomadic life was brutal. Humanity bands of humanity coming across each other will kill each other, and the death rates.
We don't know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely though. That we do.
Well, you just bump into another tribe, you auto fight.
Yes, tribal humans were very, very violent, very
territorial,
worse than us.
Scared.
Oh yeah, hundreds of times, thousands of times worse than us.
I don't see how they could be. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years.
They were really incredibly scared back then.
Yeah, but the amount of people who die in our wars, even World War II, was like 0.5% of the population or something of one of the countries involved. It was not a lot of. It was not like the death rates were not at these levels when we were tribal. Tribal humanity was incredibly violent. There's this idea that tribes are this tranquil glade of wonderful, untouched fairy people who are beautiful to each other and swimming in pools, but actually they're very kind of. They're like, you see the behavior in chimps though too, that are very violent to each other and very.
What's the evidence for that? Is it they just found loads of people with their heads stoved in by a rock sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of books about it. I mean, I think I read about it. So okay, again, take it with a pinch of salt. But as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong.
Just thinking if I can remember any actual violence in the Flintstones. I know Fred every once in a while would like bonk Barney on the head, with the rock or whatever.
Pterodactyls would fly around when he was dazed. Not birds, little pterodactyls.
Yeah, little tiny pterodactyls. Yeah.
So look, I think what we have here. We need to move on before we get too stuck in the ancient era. Right. But farming. I think we have farming. We have bronze working, which obviously was important. The invention of a calendar, which was, again, these are sort of evolutionary things where you can imagine no one really sat down and thought about it like too much, whereas they just noticed that there was seasons happening.
I feel
it
like
gets cold and then it gets hot.
I feel like when we
start writing that down.
When we think of these inventions, though, we're thinking of how we sort of receive new stuff, right? Like when the calendar was invented, like one person used it for like decades before other people were like, oh, hang on, actually, that is maybe kind of useful now that I've started doing something else.
Well,
but
I also
when
think
it was first invented, I don't think anyone gave a shit at all.
No, but I don't think it was so much
they did.
Like writing. Okay, I think writing was co-invented by lots of different people across lots of different places on the planet at the same time, right? And that's why there's so many different types of writing even now, right? Like through people making the same innovation because of necessity. It makes sense if you've burned a stick, it makes a sign on the ground, and you can turn that into an arrow, and you can use that to communicate. And it's so natural, that process, right, that it almost wasn't like the iPhone. Do you know what I mean? No one actually, or I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
All right, so here's a couple of questions.
Every technology is like that too, right? All science is incremental, right?
Yes.
Very incremental.
Consider this. The need for writing, the need for a calendar, the need for a wheel, the need for sailing,
the need for
mining
speed
only came about once we had settled down, and that was dependent on farming.
Yes.
So we didn't need to write stuff down. We didn't need to masonry. We didn't need astrology until we had settled areas where we were all planning to live for some time, and we would have to plant our crops according to the calendar that would tell us this is the good time, this is when you harvest, this is when it gets cold.
Yeah.
Not written down as January, February, March, but literally just a record of some kind that says when the sun is here, get ready to fucking harvest and stuff like that. So none of this stuff really happens, or if it does, it's ephemeral. It just disappears because it's not persistent. Without farming, none of this happens. So do you think that farming was when we started to become modern humans?
I just want to give a shout out to writing, because the important thing about writing is that it allowed people to transfer information down the ages.
But the point is, you didn't have anything that you needed to before farming.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Yeah.
And writing would be things like, for example, if you settled down in a village, recording how much crop you got, or who's married to who, or who's in charge, shit like that. Writing came about from that. Because if you're just saying, wake up in the morning, pick some berries, kill a rabbit, get on with my day, you don't need to write that shit down.
But some forms of writing would have potentially existed before that, though, because I think a big push for writing would have been religion and organized religion, right?
But again, that doesn't come about until you settle down.
I don't know, though.
You have to settle down.
I think there would have been some sort of record of what people were doing in terms of religion potentially before
what
that.
What religion though?
Because we're talking writing, look at cave symbols and stuff is kind of writing, isn't it? It's using something to describe or create some imagery around, which would have come way before farming, right?
But so they have discovered there was this guy. This was in a story a couple of weeks ago, who looked at these ancient cave paintings and saw these markings on there that are some kind of number system.
Yeah.
And it was either to do with how many of that animal they had killed, or what is the good month to hunt this animal.
Yeah.
I'll kill 4 saber-toothed tiger this month.
In April alone, best month on record. I'll have high score.
Bumper month.
Right, best month ever. Put in
Mog only killed 2 buffalo.
Paint picture of Mog with pile of dead bison and put 4. Mog killed 4 in month 4. Job done. Best ever. So that form of writing, that was super basic.
Yeah, but
you wonder whether that was because they were traveling around.
It's like Ugg's Tinder profile.
I get what you're saying. I think like the writing you're describing, I agree, would have come after people were more settled and there were more reasons to write things down or whatever. But there's definitely got to be some push from religion far before any of this.
I don't think religion even came out. I disagree.
Like
I think
early forms of description
later.
or scripture or something like that.
I think that was like a bit later. But I think also, I mean, what we're talking about here is people who are really barely modern humans, right?
Yeah.
They're very automatic, right? I mean, using sort of settling down. These civilizations are like the oldest ones, right? We're talking about here is this as that don't really we don't have good records for anymore because they're so ancient. They don't really have any.
But you even look at sort of like the medieval and maybe pre-medieval ages. Writing wasn't something that everybody did. Writing was something that like 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, but they relied on it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I suppose.
They needed it. I still think that religion didn't happen until we start to settle down, because that's when you start to bury your dead in a way where...
We'll get to religion in a minute.
All right. I think religion
I think it's been... I think in one form or another, it's been around for... It's like one of the first things,
that's almost like
right?
shamanism, and just like... But that's animism, and basically, eat these herbs and berries. It's almost like a sort of, mystic, witch doctor type, rather than talking about some great creation.
Sure, but that stuff does evolve into... what we know it today,
mysticism
though, right?
is commonly one that is like this ancient idea. I don't know why it's not in Civ. Again, that's you bringing up a good one that's not here, Sips, mysticism, because that is a thing that humanity discovered, and it affected us, and it changed us. And it also sort of provided
people together more.
Well, it was the earliest kind of communication, and also the earliest kind of moral code.
Yeah. So in earlier Civs, prior to 5, there was a tech called ceremonial burial.
Sure.
And they thought that the act of burying a body and sensing that this body has some connection to something beyond death, that it needs to be honored, was a big step. Rather than just leaving them where they lay and saying, well, we'll move on. You bury them. And having a ceremony around that was the start of rituals, and religion comes from that. Because then you have someone saying, what happens to him after he dies? And then you need some kind of priest to say, and come up with something, right? And then where did we come from? And questions like that come about. Burying a body is not something that animals do, to the best of my knowledge. I know ants have a little ant graveyard, so they might be next. They might be at the start of the tech tree.
I think they just dump dead ones outside the nest or take them away so they don't go moldy or whatever.
If you were looking at us, you might say the same thing. They just dig a hole and put them in the ground.
Well, I think
that is a big deal.
No, but I think you've got to understand that these humans were our same species. They did feel sad when someone they cared, and we evolved with emotions, right? We these are important parts of our condition, right?
Right.
Like
but
we want to look after. We're stronger together. We
religion.
look after each other. We are sad when one of us dies, and I think that innate part of our genetic code, right, has obviously led to this idea of, you know, sadness and loss and wanting to remember someone and wanting to revere someone who's helped or done good, or, you know, and I think that in turn leads to this idea of mystic sort of thought, you know.
But anyway, religion needs consistency, or it's not a religion. So that's why you need things like writing and a permanent society, even a small one.
Yeah, that's what I'm
saying. Base it around.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. I think that earlier forms of writing were probably to do with religion in some way, shape, or form, right? Because it requires it to be handed down and for people to follow it.
So what's your vote for the ancient era? Let's move on.
For me, it's farming. I think none of this happens without farming, but that's just
Sips.
Me.
Well, I think farming is super important for sure. I would agree with farming, but I just had questions around the sequencing and stuff.
It's good to have a discussion. Let's move on to the classical era. So this is when
this is the Greeks and the Egyptians and all that.
To actually build things that we recognize. Yeah, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the kind of large-scale constructions, you know, the pyramids and walls and bricks, houses, iron working, you know, wars.
Yeah,
currency is obviously a huge one with you know, being able to exchange a token for your labor and get that back when you want it rather than bartering. It's sort of the beginnings of civilization as well. Yeah. The Greeks had amphitheaters, they had drama, they had poetry, they had stories, and philosophy, absolutely philosophy, with the great Greek philosophers really lining down a very ethical code of conduct, you know, and you know, how to believe, how to feel. You know,
honestly, it was also how
wrestling
to think.
With our
how do we
side.
think about things? And some of the stuff they said, like Euclid and guys like that, was so fundamental that it seems obvious, but nobody had said this stuff and codified it before. And that was like what they did in this era. But this was all built on the fact that now you had time to have lads whose entire job was wearing a toga and talking bollocks all day. I mean, we are the absolute extreme of that. Because we spend our time sitting around playing video games or recording a fucking
replace
podcast.
Toga with bathrobe and replace...
Or pajamas in my case, and we're away with it. I mean,
exactly.
We're able to do this shit because there are other people out there as part of our wider society doing all the other jobs, like making electricity come to my house, making water come to my house, all this shit. So the growth of society, these guys were at the start of it. And even then, they had time to have people whose whole job was thinking about maths. Like, that's how quickly we advanced because of farming and the ability to settle down in permanent places and not have to move to get food. And then currency came about because we found out there were other people who had shit. And we were like, how are we going to trade with them? I don't want to have to ship 1 million sheep over here and get 10 billion bushels of corn over here. How about we give them money and then we can just buy shit from each other. Pretty interesting. Vital
it's super
for trade.
Interesting. It's this sort of era. Again, I think a lot of people look at this era as some. I mean, it's still a long time ago, and it seems glowing, like in terms of how we look at it. Right? We imagine Rome and Greece as these places with clean streets, you know, and white paneled buildings, and then it sort of goes worse in a sense, right? It gets worse. It goes all medieval and plaguey, and everyone goes back to knights and fighting and crusading and stuff like this. And you know, it goes all kind of strange in the medieval era and the Dark Ages. Of course,
well, they call it the Dark Ages, but apparently that's not the done thing now. You mustn't call it the Dark Ages. It's a out of date term for that era.
Yes,
and I think it was because a lot of historians, when they came up with the term, were in love with ancient Rome and ancient Greece and saw it, like you said, as this ideal society.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, all conquering in the case of the Romans, you know, they just fucking took places over. But essentially what they achieved was unbelievable. But it's funny that we look at Rome and Greece as these amazing things, but the Egyptians were around for like 3,000 years, being a civilization and building amazing things like the pyramids and having all of this shit. And people don't really think about these great Egyptian thinkers. So my question is, what happened in Egypt? And I have no idea. Ancient Egypt is a mystery to me. It's as ancient to the Romans as the Romans are to us.
Yeah.
Quite famously. Like that's how ancient the pyramids were. So when they look at the pyramids, they were like, that was the ancient world to them. And the Romans and the Greeks were like, this is the modern age now. But the Egyptians were like the first major fucking civilization that stood the test of time. I mean, they would have won Civ. They were around for 3,000 years.
Yeah.
They had a lot of emperors, so many that we're discovering new ones even now because, you know, they're
Didn't they just discover one like recently, like a gold-plated mummy or something like that in one of the tombs? Like this is like a couple of days ago.
Schisms, didn't they? And as you could imagine, when a new one comes along, he wants to undo the last one who was unpopular or whatever, or wipe him from the history books. And so they did tend to try and forget some of them. But yeah, this is a time that's not well documented. I think that's also an element of the Dark Ages. It didn't feel like there was like a lot of well documented stuff.
You kind of had to figure it out by piecing bits of crap that you find in the ground together rather than having it written out for you, right?
Maybe. Yeah. So I think
the Dark Ages was after Rome.
What are these core? Oh, yeah, it was in
the Dark Ages was like the early hundreds AD,
the early
right?
tens.
So
really
medieval.
Early
so
medieval.
Where do you think we have? What do you think are the big things from this time? I mean, obviously construction, currency, drama.
I think engineering and mathematics have got to be the big ones.
I think I'd go with maths. Yeah, I mean, if you look at mathematics, celestial navigation is big. So I'll just read them out, by the way, because we didn't do that. Celestial navigation, currency, horseback riding, ironworking, shipbuilding, maths, construction, and engineering. I mean, construction relies on engineering, essentially.
Yeah.
Mathematics is the foundation for both.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be building something, you need to have an understanding of sizes. So you'd need to make sure, for example, if you're building a house, that all four walls are the same height, and that the roof has a certain angle and all these things. And whilst you could definitely do that by eye, and I'm sure early huts and things, they didn't say, oh, well, Mog, your mud hut, 2 fingers lower on left side. Oh, embarrassing.
Mog is a cowboy builder. Do
to
not
one
trust
side
him.
of hut. Exactly. So I think early on, of course, those kind of houses, you just stuck sticks in the ground and, you know, put your thatched roof on and covered it in shit and you were away with it. But once you start building Parthenons and pyramids, you need maths.
You do, aqueducts and all that shit.
Yeah, maths I think is a good one. Let's go with maths.
Math.
And we'll move on to...
We're just skipping classical era. We've just said maths.
Oh,
Next, let's go.
I think it's got to be the most important
But I think
thing.
it stands out, doesn't it? I think philosophy and these things, you're right, like they're important. And drama and poetry too, like just kind of, but I think they are a continuation of what went before in whereas maths feels like, I don't know, it feels like such a game changer.
Yeah.
You know, for humanity to understand that there's these hidden rules behind the physical world.
And it's the same for everybody. If you showed anybody maths, it's like it is the first universal language we've created. It's saying it doesn't matter what language we speak, 1 and 1 is 2.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, you might have a different name for it, but these rules that we've come up with for things like trigonometry and all this kind of stuff, is 100% true across the world for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's big. That's a big understanding leap that there are some fundamental rules to things. And from that, you get all sciences, I think, would probably come from mathematics. So I would say maths is the root. However, one interesting thing, what do you think about horses? Because without horses, fuck all happens, I think. I think we relied so much on horses for so long that to ignore them would be kind of silly.
I think discovering the usefulness of horses would have just happened no matter what, whereas discovering mathematics was maybe less likely than the usefulness of horses. You know what I mean?
You've got to think. Well, look, if we talk about this, there's got to be some sort of idea of a bottleneck, right? Where a civilization can't advance beyond a certain level because they didn't have horses. And I wouldn't necessarily think that horses were the stumbling block of would have blocked up humanity getting to where it is, right? If horses didn't exist on the planet, or some sort of would we still be here? I think
I don't think we would. I don't think we'd be where we are without horses. Genuinely.
Well,
I think we'd be way behind.
But somebody would have ridden a horse at some point had it not been
but
the
imagine there were no
one
horses.
person who did it. No, if there was no horses, that's a different thing. But
so the question is, we're not talking about technology so much as the chance that horses, these incredibly useful animals, exist. We can't really rely on that. We're
just talking about people realizing that they can use something, right? That does exist.
Well, I think it's kind of a primitive. So this is where machinery comes in. So in the medieval era, we started to make machines. We obviously had some. We had like levers and screws and like wells and things like this, right? Where you'd have the ability to make like things that human labor or animal labor couldn't manage on its own, right? So like a crossbow is the classic example in Civ, or a lumber mill, where they have these big pieces of machinery set up to do something that a human or a horse can't pull, or can't do. Yeah.
So are we saying that necessity being the mother of invention, if we didn't have horses, we would have come up with something else?
That's
which is why
saying.
Fred Flintstone had the car prior to the domestication of horses.
That's right.
If we'd never domesticated horses, we'd all be riding around in cars.
Well, no, because
like
back
Fred.
then they domesticated dinosaurs. And dinosaurs
That's true,
were
but they weren't
their horses.
riding them. They weren't riding
They
them.
could.
No.
I'm sure I saw Bam Bam riding around on Dino a couple of times.
Maybe as a joke, but they had cars,
fun.
dude.
Yeah, but maybe the first person who ever rode a horse just did it as a joke. Oh, Jean-Pierre, you're hilarious. Get off of that steed. But no, Jean-Luc, look what I can do. I can plow a field.
Catch me. Why don't you make me?
I can pull a plow through the field now, idiot. Stupid idiot. Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's how the whole thing...
The French were the ones. Yeah. Jean-Pierre and his mates discovered horseback
Jean-Guy and Jean-Pierre, they did it. Oh, man.
Let's talk about aura frames. A-U-R-A, like an aura. Like they have a mystical aura around them. I love my aura frame. I'd never say this for things I don't like. I genuinely like this. It's fantastic. You just put it on the side there, you set it up, you get all your pictures on there. It's great. It's great. Genuinely great. You should definitely get one. Here's the blurb. Right now, they have a great deal for Mother's Day. Listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com. Use code Triforce to get up to $30 off plus free shipping on their best-selling frames. This deal ends on May the 14th, so do not hesitate. Not even for a moment. Terms and conditions do apply. Named the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter, the strategist, and selected as one of Oprah's favorite things. Oprah Winfrey's favorite things. Not her billions of dollars or her talk show, but the aura frame. It's guaranteed to make your mum or your grandmum smile. Let me tell you what, I'll be honest with you, I think it's great for anybody. If you got anyone this present, they'd be pleased. If you got it for yourself, you'd be delighted. You would be delighted with yourself. Either way, Aura Frames. That's A-U-R-A frames.com. Check it out. So now we're jumping to the medieval era.
Yeah, I think we need to move this on a bit because I think so much important stuff comes later. But we've got our choices here. I mean, the chivalry, of course.
So we got military tactics, the buttress, apprenticeship, stirrups, machinery, education, military engineering, and castles.
I gotta say that for me, it's education in this list. Because I think again, it's actually formalizing education and sort of setting a baseline for some sort of education is probably more important for the long term over like a lot of the sort of immediate things, right? Like the code of chivalry. I don't think is that is huge, long-reaching.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I certainly think...
in the realm.
But then there are people who still practice that code today. Look at all the people that are willing to help you with gold and doing quests and WoW and stuff, especially males to females. You know what I mean? Like, there's still a lot of chivalry around today.
Yeah, right. I see.
You don't call it chivalry anymore.
No, they don't really. It's a creepier
I think
form.
a lot of these things are extensions of existing technology, like stirrups, for example. Machinery, yes, very important, but comes about because of engineering and mathematics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Education, they definitely had education in the past.
Yeah.
So, but I think this is a more formalized idea of having specific buildings where you didn't just have to be a mate of Plato's or whatever to get an education.
No, this was more like people were becoming more educated. Even then, they were probably still not very educated at the time.
No,
but I think
this
the
leads
idea
more than they ever were, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the idea of schooling and universities for the masses, right?
I mean, not then, but it leads to it, doesn't it?
It's leading on to the removal of this idea of peasants and lords, that's the sort of feudal image, isn't it, of 99% of the populace being uneducated serfs, and the 1% that we hear about, the Henry VIIIs of the world.
Imagine a world where just 1% of the people owned everything and were the rich ones. It's unbelievable.
That's unreal.
Oh, those crazy medievalites.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it, to think that was the case. But it was back then. Like there was a very small proportion of the educated class who were the decision makers, the writers, the history people, the people who really kept civilization rolling. And most people were kind of living fairly still agrarian lives.
I would like to just point out that not much has changed in that regard. We just know it's happening a little bit.
Well, in certain
still
parts of the world, I'm sure it's still the same. So I mean, the medieval era, it's an interesting one to think about. Because, as we've said, like it feels like there wasn't like a major turning point that seems obvious, right?
Yeah, it's always depicted as being so fucking dreary, though. The medieval,
it is. It feels like a pretty grim time, doesn't it? Castles, though, no castles, no kingdoms, because you need castles.
Oh, castles are cool for sure, and the fact that a lot of them are still more or less around shows that like they knew what they were doing to some extent back then.
They apparently did.
I mean, people started to discover physics as well, and these sort of other sciences, and also
alchemy, the quest to turn base matter into gold.
Also, sort of the beginnings of real trade too, like proper trade between places on long distances, like the Silk Road and places like guilds coming up and the merchant classes, as an important part of civilization, right? Yeah. That started to become a thing here where there was a lot of that going on, and I don't know, like it leads into the kind of, I guess, into the next era too, like the Renaissance, which is
our next era.
Huge.
So what are we saying for medieval? Time.
I think we said education. I think that was a good shout.
You want machinery or education?
I think education. I think
education is pretty good, yeah.
I think machinery is a very good one and does lead into things, for sure. But I think that education leads to things like the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance
I think
era.
Machinery is a bit vague as well, because there was so much. I guess you could treat every single machine like the lever, and there's different types of. Yeah. I think it's not until we get to like steam power that we really have a big change in.
Like epoch-defining change was the industrial era machinery. I think changed things more. But hey, what do we know? So Renaissance era, we got cartography, mass production, banking, gunpowder, printing, square rigging, astronomy, metal casting, and siege tactics.
Holy crap.
But
it's a tough one to choose
as well
from
in this era, which is very standout, which isn't on that list, which is the printing press.
Yeah, printing is on there.
It is on there.
It literally says printing.
It says print. I didn't hear you say
printing
press.
Right.
I might have missed it. I'm sorry.
Actually, on the list fully says printing press. Just saying.
So the thing is, right, mass production, that did make a difference.
Yeah.
I watched, if you've ever got the chance to watch The Ascent of Man by Jacob Bronowski, Professor Bronowski, which was a TV show in the 70s on the BBC. I have it on DVD. Unfortunately, my computer doesn't have a DVD player, otherwise I'd be watching it. He talks about what a difference mass production of things made. And one of the lines that he says really has always stuck with me. He said that the good life is not found in material decency, but the good life is based on material decency. So being able to have things like plates, furniture, cutlery, clothing that you can rely on to give you material decency leads to a better life for most people.
Yeah.
And I thought mass production was really a part of that, because rather than have to go to Steve the pot maker and get a pot from Steve, you could buy mass-produced pots that were much cheaper because of it. So now everyday people, certainly maybe in the Renaissance era, but certainly as we come into the industrial era, the Industrial Revolution, everybody, whether rich or poor, was able to at least have some level of material decency in these countries.
Yeah.
I think so that was a big change in the way people lived. But that's just an early shout. Because cartography, of course, changed the face of the world. Having maps, if you look at medieval maps, they're fucking dog shit.
Yeah, they are.
having a good way, because we've got these ships and we know there's stuff out there. So sailing around and conquering everything was what we did for several hundred years.
Era is kind of around the time where the colonies, like colonization of North America and stuff was happening as well, right?
Like proper, not just turning up and conquistadoring everything, but actually building a new nation. In these places. And being able to get there consistently, and international trade and all the things that we were bringing back from those places, like potatoes and tobacco and rubber
spices
and that.
Furs and all the important stuff.
Without a good map, you're fucked. You're just casting yourself into the ocean and hoping you hit the West Indies and America.
And
so
of course, this is all linked to astronomy too, in the age of looking out of Earth, looking at the stars, using the stars to navigate, becoming
celestial
aware
navigation was last era, by the way, and we kind of skipped over it.
But astronomy probably becomes
astronomy leads
a
to
bigger
that.
deal.
So banking
the other
as well.
Element that you sorry, go on. What was the
No, I
next
was just going to say these top three are all really kind of super important. I think
they're powerful, and then also remember gunpowder.
Yeah, gunpowder changed everything.
That's a big one. Yeah. Banking in the Renaissance area is like the bank in Mary Poppins, though, right? Like it's like that. It's not like the banking we know today. It's important enough, but I don't think it's the most important thing in the era.
But it is kind of what it leads to, because once you have banking, you can start to have big companies that can do things like run up debts and credits, and it does lead to. Yeah, but think about things like East India Company and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Without banking a lot of these big companies, how does that all work? How does it hang together? You need banking, and also leads to this merchant class having something to do with their money, somewhere to keep it safe. You move away from just keeping it in a fucking vault like a dragon to having an organized system of finance is pretty important for then growing the big companies that would go on to drive the Industrial Revolution, I think. But
I mean, I think you get these. I think that what really happens is, though, I think we got science that drives things. You know, I think you can always say, chemistry, physics, these fields drive innovation, right? Like without chemistry and gunpowder, we wouldn't have had the steam engine and this sort of thing, right? And the idea of outsourcing gunpowder, I think, was outsourcing killing to a machine kind of thing.
Yeah.
And also the idea that you can take things from the ground and use that energy in lieu of your physical energy, right? Like you don't have to pump a thing manually, but you can burn something to get the energy out of it, right? And have that impact. And so I think that means that you can do more. You can be more productive with your time. These are obviously things that are important. But I think the mass production element and also the printing press, I think people will say is one of the biggest breakthroughs, because it was so crucial to mass. I mean, I guess it is part of the mass production element, right? The idea that you can share its information widely, quickly, with huge amounts of people and have it last for a long time.
I mean, also, I think that the other thing about printing and the printing press is, if you think about what followed after this era, we had French Revolution, American Revolution as two of the biggest of the time, and the ability now, if you start a printing press, more people are going to be reading because there's something to read. So the printing press almost encourages people to learn to read, because now you can read the news, you can read the things that they put on the boards, the proclamations are all printed and disseminated. So you almost, because of printing, you empower people And that's how you have organized movements like revolutions and things like that.
Absolutely.
And if you have to ride around on a horse and say, "Oi, village, are you guys ready for the revolution?" You'd be like, "What revolution?" We haven't been keeping up with current affairs,
with
mate.
humanity is a exponential sort of thing, right? Where initially there were very small amounts of intellectual people doing intellectual things and making progress, right? And we've got millions of people on the planet who could be helping with this, right? Before the printing press, there were only 100 books in Cambridge University Library, and the average cost of a book was more than the average worker made in a year.
Wow.
So books were, astonishingly rare comparatively, and within 60 years, there were newspapers being spread across England, and it was so much, common people could have the Bible in their house, and it was a real game changer in terms of just increasing the intelligence of the planet. And at that point, really, that was such a turning point for everyone else getting involved, and so many more people being able to contribute to advancements and invention and become, push the human species forward, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't limited to the few people in their monasteries or manor houses who had time and luxury to think or make their lives easier, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was able to start applying it to their own lives and do small inventions that improve stuff, which you still see today. People are able to 3D print stuff now to like just make microscopic changes in their lives. Invention is just helped by more people. So mass production, like you said, I think they're part of the same thing, really. Actually, P-Flax, that the idea that, because that is what it is. It's really interesting. So I that's my vote. Mass production.
Yeah,
actually,
I think it's an interesting one. I certainly think. I mean, when we look at the thing is, if you look at gunpowder and stuff like that, it's mass production of rifles. It's mass production of cannons. It's like producing the same thing that's going to work identically, perform identically, regardless of which one you've got. It's not like it's the uniformity of things, and I think mass production leads to that. These processes that mean if I buy this musket 1,000 times for 1,000 guys, it's the same musket. So without mass production, you don't have gunpowder having an impact. If everybody's got to fucking make their own, where you go to your local musket maker. So in a way, mass production leads to reliability and uniformity, and I think that would be kind of important. A lot of the war stuff, like sieges and cannons and gunpowder, changed the way we fight, but I don't think it didn't change it sufficiently for me that it was a game changer.
Yeah.
Because we've had wars for thousands of years. I don't think gunpowder changed the day-to-day lives of most people. They're going to be killed by a cannon or a shot instead of being killed by an arrow or spear. They're still dead. It ain't changing much. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure it did change the way we fight, but in terms of the day-to-day life, I don't know.
Though it allowed more peasants to become fighters, right? Like, you didn't have to train for years with a bow or be muscular or be, or have to learn how to fight with a sword. You just pointed a stick at someone and pressed a button, or pulled the trigger.
So in a way, it was a terrible advance. You get an army, just any old lad, stick a musket in his hand, and suddenly you've got a soldier.
Yeah, and I think that's where certainly the Napoleonic Wars came from. The wars shifted to this idea of total war somewhere in the sort of I think it was the Napoleon here, but where basically it went from major powers fighting with 5,000 or 10,000 people to fighting with hundreds of thousands of people, and really just giving everyone anyone was now a soldier, right? And they didn't have this specific sort of soldiering class, or they didn't have to recruit the local lords and men at arms and all this nonsense.
Right? Just anyone.
Was just galvanizing the entire populace into war.
But since everybody's doing that, it's like an escalation of arms where it's all still equal.
It's definitely linked to the idea of mass production.
Yeah.
Which I think
so are we going to say mass production?
I'm still on board. What do you think, Sips?
Yeah, I think if you're going to say mass production, which I could agree with, but I think industrial is done then, because if you're saying mass production, then in the industrial era, you just have to take industrialization, right, over anything else.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what there is. There's industrialization.
There's electricity.
So we're moving on to the industrial area.
Yeah.
Industrialization, scientific theory, which is a big one.
Biology.
I'm going to ignore
electricity
ballistics and military science, because I think that's still an extension of what we had before. We had steam power. Sanitation really shouldn't be there, I think sanitation is a weird one to put there because the Romans had some idea of sanitation, but this idea of cleaning your hands before treating somebody, that sewage was bad, obviously that's important for sure and saved countless lives. But really it's weird that I think industrial era medicine would be a better way of saying sanitation. Economics is pretty crazy important as well. Like this was such a huge era changing the landscape of the world. Even now we feel the effects of course. I mean, industrialization is absolutely massive, shaped our country. Let's just talk about the UK. The UK was entirely defined by industrialization in terms of why cities are where they are, what their specialties were, shipbuilding, coal mining, factories, mass production of things in industrial settings. Industrialization is still how we live. Essentially, we live in industrialized societies. So industrialization, surely. But we then have scientific theory, the actual foundation of how we got most of the modern technology we've got is because of a consistent and rigorous scientific method that did away with a whole bunch of crap that we took for granted and considered fact. And so, well, actually, we need a formal way of investigating the natural world. And scientific theory did that. I mean, it was huge, beginning not really in the industrial area, but beginning with Isaac Newton and people like that, of formalizing science. And without that, I don't think we get most of the other things that we've got on the list.
Probably not.
Yeah. The three big ones from here are, as you said, steam power, the idea that, you can put coal into something and it does the work of 100 horses.
It's like what you were saying about gunpowder, maybe discovering that you can burn this thing and it produces more energy than you put in. It feels like that. Then steam power is like, if we just heat this up, this water will do the work of 1,000 horses.
Yeah.
That's
it's compact too, so it's you can transport it where you need that energy. I think a lot of people still argue about this, and this is linked to electricity, right? Electricity is obviously again a huge tool that makes things work, right? You can transfer electricity across hundreds of miles, and nowadays anyway, and it enables you to. I think a lot of people measure the current global productivity based on energy use, right? And that might well be the amount of coal burned, the amount of electricity used, whatever. It's kind of a clever metric to use rather than gross domestic product or any of these sort of financial models. If you actually just look at how much resources are being burned to make other things, that kind of gives you an idea of the productivity of the planet, and it always seems to be going up too, right?
So here's a question though, because our electricity still essentially relies on steam and turbines. Like a nuclear power plant is essentially a very efficient steam engine. Yeah. You heat water, the water pushes a turbine, and you generate electricity. So steam power is at the root of electricity, and I mean, electricity as a thing wouldn't be as useful as it is if we couldn't mass produce it and ship it out to houses like the one that we all live in, that I live in here, that is recording this fucking podcast relying on electricity generated somewhere by steam. So in a way, steam power is if we hadn't figured that out, fuck electricity. Who gives a shit? It's a novelty.
Electricity is definitely towards the late end of this sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, you get steam power, then you get electricity later. And I mean, also you've got elements of other things like other bits like medicine. I think medicine is the other major thing that we should consider that isn't necessarily listed in this list well.
Yeah, I think sanitation would be the best way to put it, even though it should really say early medicine, and what
pasteurization, penicillin,
all of that came out of that.
This is. I mean, antibiotics weren't until this. The 1928 was penicillin was discovered, but it wasn't really widely adopted until after World War II, or at least during World War II. So
vaccines. I mean, we'd have to put vaccines in there amongst sanitation as well, because all of a sudden you could have huge bustling cities where people didn't just all fucking die of smallpox or whatever, because we were immune to disease, allowed the industrialized world to expand the way it has, urban centers to grow much denser without just saying, well, this is just a fucking cholera outbreak waiting to happen. We had the elimination of diseases start to come in to the point where now we've just had COVID, and it's relatively topical to talk about diseases in cities. I get that, but the point is, the reason that fucked everything up for us, and we were all so shaken by it, it's because that doesn't happen. These kind of things don't happen anymore.
No.
I mean, you go back 150 years or whatever, and this kind of stuff was, or 200 years, and it was fucking everywhere. People dying of disease all the fucking time. And all kinds of dumb shit we don't die from now. So I think this was the start of modern medicine, really.
I think people lived in fear of unknown stuff. I was like, it was kind of bad luck, and sometimes, the head of the family would be knocked off due to consumption or something, which obviously we now know is tuberculosis. And all of these other things, that they were surrounded by death, really, of this specter
all the
of
time,
disease.
And kids as well. Infant mortality, unbelievable.
Could bump you off, yeah. And I think that, again, that modern medicine has led to this incredible spike in global population. Infant mortality was the big one that kind of kept the population of the Earth not constant, but lower than it is now for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why, in the last 100 years, we've seen this growth, almost exponential of people on the planet. And it's because medicine came in, stopped all the babies dying, but didn't change any other systems. And so people were still having big families because they knew that a couple of them would die. It was a cultural thing.
Right.
It was like, we need to have these big families to work the fields, or to for our our clan, or just custom. These families have this.
Also, to look after you when you get old. There's no pensions and shit like that.
That's true. Yeah.
You need big families. But so from this list, I think there are four, which is kind of tricky: industrialization, scientific theory, sanitation, and steam power.
I think industrialization moves into the mass production of the previous era. I think that the scientific theory is important, but again, we can't just pick broad sciences because they're not. This science is so incremental. I think the invention of steam was a turning point, and the invention of electricity was something that was a real invention. I think it's like steam power and electricity feel like those things were invented, right? And discovered, and and
then kind of paved the way for industrialization after.
As much as we think about things being gradual, and everyone can invent things. I've already sort of said that, but electricity was invented by very smart people at a time and used, and really kind of, it was, I guess, just feels so crucial, right, to what went on. I mean, yes, steam power was important, and everything builds upon each other. But I don't know, it's got that element of just so necessary, right? It smoothed everything, electricity, and having it allowed us to replace candles and burning oil. In a sense, like, imagine like if we'd killed all the whales earlier and no one had whale oil to burn, would humanity have petered out? Right. Without, if we'd invented different things at different times. I think this is an interesting idea to think about with other. It's that thing in I can't remember what it's called, where there's like these barriers which civilizations have to overcome to grow, to go into space or whatever, right? The idea is that the great filters, they're called.
I think it's the great filter. Yeah.
So there's this idea that why it's a Fermi paradox. Here you go. So why, when we listen to space, do we not hear any alien life, right? When millions of years has gone by, and there should be some signals coming to us, right? Because our signals are going out there now, and sure, they won't be there for tens of thousands of years, but we should be hearing alien noise, and the fact that we're not means that it's a bit unusual, right? Like, aliens haven't visited Earth. We haven't found any evidence of them visiting Earth or the Moon in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of years that Earth has been going around the sun. So where is alien life? And the idea is that there's these great filters which stop civilizations from growing. Now, some of those we may have past. This is an interesting idea that there's some technologies or some things that humans might have done or might not have, barriers that we might not have been able to get over that stopped us. And is that where the other aliens have
what if we're just
as well?
The most advanced civilization in the galaxy? It's possible.
Yeah.
Oh my
just
God.
Through sheer luck.
I hope we are.
Through serendipity.
I hope we are,
Yeah, you want to be. You don't want to be the least advanced in the galaxy, that's for sure. I played enough Stellaris to know that. So what are you going to go for? You want to go for sanitation?
I'm not an expert on any of this, but I wonder, like, which of these technologies that seem simple in a sense now that we know them would or seem cultural too, like, all
right, so all right, let's narrow this down to which do we suppose did the most good in terms of saving lives, because that's generally what we've gone for, is or what I've certainly been thinking of, is what has improved the life of the average person. Because if we're going to measure it based on military science, for example, probably not.
Do we want to put medicine in here as well?
I think we'll call sanitation, and it's listed as sanitation on the list, but it really should be the start of modern medicine. So the idea of medicine as a science, not just something some quack comes up with.
What do you think,
the idea
Sips?
of that being a science that leads to things like vaccines and stuff like
that.
Yeah,
I think probably that, honestly. I think it's got to be the most important thing, right? Like, and probably the basis for a lot of the important things that happen too, right? Without it, you don't have
a lot falls down.
You don't have a lot of the stuff that comes out of it. That's what I think, anyway.
Right. Modern era. We've got medicine. We go medicine. Modern era. Flight.
Oh my God, we still have so many more eras to go.
Yeah, I know. There's only 2 more eras. Flight, replaceable parts, steel, refining, electricity, radio, chemistry, and combustion.
Oh my God. There's so many good ones in modern. It's crazy.
Yeah. Flight is pretty insane.
Combustion's kind of nuts. Electronics kind of nuts. Flight is kind of nuts.
I mean, steel obviously is vital because
nuts.
of the things we could build with it, but in a way that's building on Iron Age and Bronze Age and all the rest of it. So it's that's not sort of a brand new idea that we use metal to make things. But steel being as strong as it is, meant we could build an awful lot more. Because if you don't have steel, there's a lot of stuff that we can't do, that we're never able to build. But electricity, which leads to radio is huge, right? Being able to communicate with people instantaneously, and not just like the telegraph, but literally people's voices, music, and then that leads to television and all that.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, though, radio, television, all filters into mass media, which was apparently removed in Gods and Kings, so I don't think it's important. Okay. It wasn't important enough because they removed it in Gods and Kings, so...
Yeah, they removed it.
So I think everything that you just said is actually cancelled out.
Well, I think radio's really cool, though. Like, and it is...
What about refrigeration, though? It's got to be a big one too, right?
That's later, I think, isn't it?
No, it's modern.
That's true.
I don't see it in modern era.
So Sips and I are looking at the Civ 5 list. You're looking at the Civ 6 list.
Oh, I am. I clicked the one that you sent, and I opened that. Well, list of technologies in Civ 5. I'm clicking on the link.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list of technologies in Civ 5 as well.
I don't know how you ended up on the wrong one.
I don't know how I did either. I'm looking at it, though. Gosh. So this whole time I've been looking. I mean, this is a simpler list. That other one's a fucking nightmare.
It's good. I haven't brought it up earlier because it was good. Your list's slightly different, and so we end up overlapping.
Had a different
we get
viewpoint.
We get more info.
How has it taken us an hour to realize this?
Well, we're not the smartest people.
All right. Shit.
Sorry about this.
So, I mean, replaceable parts is an extension of mass production, I think. The idea that you can make something and just slot out some bits. That's like an extension of that. Very important, of course, but I feel like they put that in a different way.
Right?
Flight is huge.
Flight is huge. It is big. But I don't know if it's like honestly a bigger deal than refrigeration. Like maybe you guys will think I'm nuts, but I think refrigeration is
no.
insane.
I think you are 100% right.
Because refrigeration, don't forget that refrigeration is important for not only preserving and lengthening the freshness of food. Right, but it's also used in medical applications. It's also used in industrial applications. Like there's a ton of different things that you would use refrigeration for.
Modern life would not be without aircon. Oh
Don't
my God.
even.
I mean, honestly, I think you're right. I mean, especially if we put something like, say, canning foods in amongst refrigeration. So the preservation of food past just a table, farmed, the field to plate sort of mechanical, keeping grain in a silo and hoping for the best. Being able to preserve things absolutely led to the industrialization of food, as you can just ship it in a fucking refrigerated container, and now I get my avocado on toast every morning, no problem. So changed modern life for sure. I think refrigeration is a very good shout.
It is, but is it more important than electronics?
It is
on my
for
list
sure.
Because I'm on the Civ.
As important as electronics are, and there's no denying that they are important, they are massively important. I think I think refrigeration is something that improves the quality of our health and lives, right? More so than electronics.
I'm not saying.
I mean, electronics in medicine, obviously, for modern medicine, is a huge thing too. But if you're thinking of,
I see where you're coming from.
If you're thinking of
electronics,
so what you're saying
is that
in a day-to-day sense, there's a lot of electronics we could just...
Having access to Twitter and social media really doesn't actually help us, whereas refrigeration keeps us alive a lot longer.
I think it does.
However, bear in mind that we're talking about this in terms of the convenience and how good it is. I mean,
refrigeration has preserved Walt Disney for all these years as well. So, like, in terms of actually fully keeping people going.
But just consider the damage that the ability to refrigerate meat and ship it from, say, Brazil has done. Like, if we want to talk about harmful effect of some of this technology, that gets very difficult, because then oil refining has not been great for the planet, but has been incredible in every other regard.
Yes.
Oil is a fantastic,
you would not,
amazing
you
thing.
would not have dildos without it. Like, it's in...
You wouldn't know dildos.
You're right.
They'd all be made of Bakelite, and they'd fall apart.
You'd have to use like an old corn cob or something, and nobody wants.
Exactly.
It's disgusting. That's what they used to have to use in like back in the day, right? Like, no thanks.
Corn cob. But I mean, oil is like massive. Like, that gives us plastics. Which are ridiculously fucking useful, but also have an enormous cost. So it's weird, because a lot of these technologies, as you move on, the more incredible they are, the more damaging in a way and harmful they've been as well. So it is kind of a tricky one. I mean, combustion, now we're getting into things like the atomic era, and now we've got the ability to destroy our planet instantly.
Ecology, nuclear fission, penicillin, radar, rocketry. I mean, these are all big ones. I still, for me, it's penicillin on there, though. Like, I think anything that improves health or prolongs life or whatever has got to be the standout for any era, right? And
I'd say for
nuclear fission, you could argue that it does as well, because it's because coming back to what we're saying about energy powering everything, heating homes, providing you with a means to actually cook your food and prepare your food and therefore prolong your life and be hopefully healthier and stuff like that. I would put up there too, but I think penicillin is just such a
is that on the list?
One.
Penicillin?
It is, in the atomic era.
It's got its own one on this. It's got its own one in the atomic era. I think the sort of
for modern era. What are we saying?
I think for modern era, I think you've got to think.
For me, it's refrigeration. Modern era.
But I think that means you have to say electricity.
Yeah.
Because you don't have refrigeration without electricity.
You can have refrigeration, though, without electricity.
Well, I'm not... All right, I've played RimWorld as well. Yes, you can make those fucking cooler things.
And you can have, like...
that idea's been around for a very long time.
You can have a root cellar as well. Come on.
Right. Or the ice house that they got a queue where they just stuck a bunch of ice in an underground... I think electricity has to be the most important for how it's changed our lives.
Refrigeration nearly fucking destroyed the planet when we were destroying the ozone layer with all those free...
Yeah, but like I said, all of these did.
Yeah.
Like all the modern stuff
a lot of the modern
is deadly
stuff
to the
has contributed, but
no electricity, no nothing really. None of this fucking stuff works without electricity.
All right, well, let's say electricity.
Shall we put electricity back on? Let's put electricity
even
back
though it wasn't discovered in the modern
switch
era,
it back
it's
on.
widespread use.
Let's get the lights back on.
Right. So next up we have
for atomic era.
Atomic for me, it's got to be penicillin, right? It has to be.
Well, no, we've already done
the
that.
easy one would be computers, because we're all sitting in front of one right now and probably will be spending the rest of our day at one as well. But
I think computers absolutely has to be considered the most important advance that we've made, in a way, because it's they have enabled. I mean, what we're talking about previously about horses doing the work that a person can't, and then gunpowder.
Yeah,
and
now my graphics card
work.
does all the work of mining bitcoins and stuff. So.
Exactly. But I mean, the computer can do stuff that would take us centuries and thousands of years to figure out, and it can do it. So the computer has advanced us that much further.
All right, sorry, penicillin. You had your chance, but computers has won again.
We already got there with medicine.
Well, no, penicillin's already on the list. It's under medicine.
Oh, okay.
Just
we said
relax.
that the origins of modern medicine led to penicillin,
Right.
and vaccines.
So we're saying computers, which is going to lead into the information age.
Yeah.
So it's got to be the internet, right?
Let's just quickly go over the couple that we haven't done to do with like...
The internet is only available
theory.
in the Brave New World expansion pack, though. I just want to say. So if you don't have the Brave New World expansion pack, you're not allowed to vote.
No computer for you. Yeah.
No internet for you. You can have the computer, but you just won't be able to do as much with it.
Yeah. It'll be like the 80s.
Many of these technologies now are nebulous in a sense, right? These modern information era ones. We've skipped the idea of atomic theory and nuclear weapons and things, which was obviously a huge technological advancement. But whether or not it's actually good for the planet, God knows. I suppose some people think that actually with nuclear stuff, it was convenient we discovered it when it was discovered, right? And so what happened was we discovered it. There was a war. It was used during the war, and then like we kind of saw how awful it was immediately, right? And we had the Cold War, which was a terrible time where there was this death hanging over the whole of civilization. This idea of apocalypse. The first time humanity really could have destroyed itself, right?
That's our great filter right there. Not nuking ourselves yet.
Absolutely, like this is definitely one of the ideas that it could have easily gone, and it still could.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Like there's this terrifying specter. Really, it's not disease that we're scared of now. It's idiots with a button. Yeah. So, I mean, but beyond that, like we have this idea of future technology. You know, this rocketry sending stuff into space. All the modern ideas of genetic manipulation, nanotechnology, robotics, satellites. The internet, I think, is obviously something more. You know, I think it is a step up, right? Whereas personal computers, you know, were good. They were like typewriters and, you know, calculators all in one. I think the internet, your phone without the internet, for example. I mean, phones are obviously a huge thing, but your phone without the internet is really not as impressive, right?
Yeah. Now we've got the internet. Everything prior to it looks dog shit. Quite honestly, that's the problem. Is that the access to knowledge, the access for communication is insane to have at your fingertips, and it's completely changed the way we do a lot of things for good and ill. So my money's on the internet as being like the idea of the entire fucking planet being able to talk to one another is insane.
Yeah, that is kind of nuts.
I like being able to see satellites on there. Satellites, of course, have changed an awful lot, and are very, very important. Without them, all of this fucking shit falls down, the internet and all the rest of it. So satellites, absolutely vital, but a lot of that stuff is supporting a base infrastructure, which is global telecommunications and the internet.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could email anybody anywhere, voice chat with anybody anywhere, Zoom calls, whatever you want with anybody anywhere on the fucking planet who has access to a computer is absolutely bonkers.
Hey, I got an email just this morning from the Prince of Nigeria, okay? And I've never even been there before in my life. So
exactly. And he needs help. He needs help, that guy.
He wanted $300 for some reason. I would have thought that he probably would have enough, but I guess maybe, you know,
did you not read the email?
I didn't have time because I got emails from other people as well. I'm a busy guy.
Wow, what, like the Prince of
Azerbaijan,
or somewhere else?
Yeah.
Azerbaijan, wow. Yes. I mean, I think if we look at telecommunications, the internet, if you took anything that we have nowadays and went back 200 years, that would probably be the one that blows their mind the most. The idea that, you know, you could call someone up on the other side of the planet and have an instantaneous conversation.
This has happened during our lifetime too, right? Like when I was a kid growing up, the idea that you could voice call someone with your face, right, on the screen. And you could have a phone call with someone face to face. That was the future. That was Star Trek.
It was pure Star Trek.
That was we couldn't fathom that you would be able to do that, right, in our lifetimes, really. And it happened, you know, and suddenly you're able to voice chat with people online, and it's happened in 20 years. Like,
yeah, it's amazing.
It's actually like crazy changes.
And think about things like Amazon and all that shit that's completely changed the way we shop, and everything has been affected by the internet. So yeah, for me,
and the way we behave, and who knows how
everything.
It's going to change us,
change language, absolutely,
and change.
So you're going to take the internet over stealth.
I am.
You're a brave man.
Stealth technology, I am, and composite materials. I'm taking it over composite materials as well.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm happy to go with that. I mean, robotics and all the rest of it, yes. But I don't think robotics really, whilst it has had a big effect, I think the true effect of robotics will be in the next century or two, that as more and more things start to be robotized. And the internet is obviously, I think, linked to that. And without the internet, we don't really have the advances in AI that we've had lately and all that kind of stuff. So I think the internet has to be the one for this era.
It's for the information era, for sure. I think, as much as I keep saying this, like, humanity, we are the same organisms that were tribes howling at the moon, fighting, saber-toothed tigers. Well, okay, not them, but you know what I mean? We were with the same Ugg and Mog, struggling to survive in caves.
Ugg get ratioed real bad.
Yeah, but things have changed. We have got this modern living, and it's easy to forget the background support that we have that keeps us going. The clean water, the medicine.
We got there. We covered all that.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we live, and I think this. I know we're ranking what the best technologies are, and I think it's so obviously we're also arguing in this podcast about what constitutes best, right? Like, is it best for humanity? Is it best for our current? Is it convenience? Is it best for the most people? Because I think that is hard to quantify. Certainly, medicine was this hugely important thing for so many people. Stop so much suffering. In the world. And so I think it's going to be hard to. Anyway, let's go down the list of things we've written.
All right, go on then. Because I'm glad you've written it down. I didn't write it down. So
I made a mental note. So refrigeration.
In the ancient era, we had
penicillin
farming.
in there too.
In the ancient era, we had farming, agriculture, animal husbandry. The general idea of settling down. But farming, really, and discovering that you could stay in one place.
Yeah.
In the classical era, we had education.
Yeah.
Schooling, I guess. In the medieval era, we had the idea of mass production.
Yeah.
Kind of blended with the printing press. Because that was at the same time. The Renaissance era has medicine in its modern form of sanitation, but I suppose eventually leading to vaccination and penicillin as well, which we'll lump together in medicine. I know it's not
without
quite
that,
at the same time, but
we don't study germs. We're not looking under microscopes and all the rest of it. So I think that absolutely was the start of all that. For sure.
Yeah, and then the industrial era has electricity and electronics. Into the modern era, the idea of the starting thing, and this leads us into the atomic era of computing and the personal computer, followed by the information age. And certainly what it looks like is in the last 200 years, we have basically said electricity, electronics, computers, the internet, and then what Sips would also want to add, which is refrigeration.
And stealth as well, I think, because just so fucking cool.
Stealth.
Just get it in there, just
it is
honorable
cool.
mention. Let's you know what, since it didn't make it to the list, let's do big ups to stealth this week. Come on,
big ups to stealth.
That's fucking awesome.
Don't forget about the wheel. Don't forget about the wheel. We talked about the wheel for a good 20 minutes.
It's true. We did talk about the wheel for a good 20 minutes.
I think that ancient stuff is really interesting to think about. We can see and feel the effect of the internet.
I still feel though that
like
my only understanding of it all is it really is just the Flintstones. So like I can't get past.
I get that.
It's the visual.
I did get that
it's
impression.
The visual.
Yeah. And I guess the future version that would be like Futurama. That's where we're going.
Yeah.
We're not covering anything in
Star Trek, maybe.
Yeah, we're not going to speculate. We're not going to speculate. Yeah.
No.
We're not going to speculate forward. We're going to speculate backwards.
We're going to speculate all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about the future just quickly as well. Like, if we're looking at future tech and we're looking at, like, say, the holodeck, a lot of the stuff that we've added on the list, but also the thing we added to our big up of the week as well, are all important for those things, because without, say, computers and without, say, like the internet, you could argue the holodeck would never be created. But then also without stealth, Geordie LaForge would have never been able to almost sexually assault Deanna Troi in the holodeck either. So you know what I mean? Like, it all in a roundabout way came together.
He's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big circle.
Yes.
Turns out.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's your pick of these then? I want you to pick one off the list, Sips.
As in, of all of them, which is the most important?
What's your one that you're going to pick?
I got to go with the net, guys. I got to go with the internet. For me, it's the internet for sure. Man, I love the internet. Like, I hate it and I love it at the same time. But, like, I can't imagine, like, what a day of my life would be without the internet, honestly. Like, it is the best.
It's a pretty good invention.
Mm-hmm.
Congrats to old... what's his name?
Al Gore.
Who invented it.
Don't say Tim Berners-Fucking Lee, please. Don't let me get into this again. I had a rant about this the other day. The internet was not one person's thing.
It was Al Gore's thing.
It was not Al fucking Gore either. Yeah. I want this.
It was, and then he had an affair with Larry David's wife after he invented the internet. Yes, it's true.
Oh my goodness! My personal pick is farming, because without that, I don't think any of this happens.
Wow! So you picked the first one, Sips picked the last one. I was gonna pick medicine.
All right. Well, good for you, nerd. It's good choice.
But I'm willing to switch to.
Come on, you got
the internet.
Yeah, the internet. Come on,
to switch to the internet.
Let's have a unanimous internet. I think the internet deserves it. Come on.
No, as the greatest technological invention of all time,
we wouldn't be like our lives are short.
Living in a cave
without
farming.
Our lives right now are short, right? Like we're
not relatively speaking.
Fairly though, in the grand scheme of things, you get to the end of your current life right now, you're going to look back and you're going to say that the thing
I spent too much time online is what I'm going to think.
You will, but it's also it was also the thing that enabled you to have the life that you've lived, right? Like a relatively comfortable.
What do you eat?
Life.
What do you eat?
Yeah,
do you eat the internet?
Yeah, well, I eat food that I buy with money that I made from being on the internet.
But the only reason there's food for you to buy with the money you made from the internet is because someone invented fucking farming. Sure. Otherwise, you got to grow that shit yourself, and we have to constantly be on the move.
I got a garden. I could grow some couple of bits and pieces. I don't think it would last me a year.
Laptop and Wi-Fi only without farming.
Oh, right. Well, I tried.
It's tricky.
I tried.
Well, do you know what? That swayed me, P-Flex. I agree. Farming.
Fuck you both.
I'll go back to farming.
Both of you. Go enjoy your field. I'll be sitting here in my garage playing games on the internet.
No, you won't. You got to keep on the move. You got to keep on the move. You can't have a garage.
I'm not on the fucking
Yeah, you have to be. There's no food. You got to go find some, bud.
No, I'm just buy some.
Go foraging.
From who?
The supermarket has been invented.
Ugg the
it's around, yeah.
Berries for sale. One bushel, please. It's almost like he's farmed those berries and now he's selling them to you. I don't know.
He's onto something. This.
Oh my god, we're starting it. Yeah. We're starting civilization.
Yeah,
finally.
exactly.
Holy crap.
But we're ending this podcast.
That was a bit longer than we expected, but I had fun talking about history for an hour.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Me too.
And I hope you did too. Thank you for joining us. And please don't write to us about how wrong we are.
I don't want to hear about this one.
Please do not email us.
Please do not email us.
Do not.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.